You live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Free Assange Visual 54.1. Today, we have 3,507 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange. It is 460 days since the WikiLeaks publisher was trafficked, I repeat, trafficked, from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the UK for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. We have 55 days until the second phase of Julian's show trial and rendition hearing. There has been 1,137 days of incarceration for Reality Winner, and Chelsea Manning, our good news, is 123 days of freedom starting today. I am joined today by co-hosts Steve Boykinen and Andrew Smith, and we have amazing guests tonight. We have Marjorie Cohn, and we also have David McBride. And we only have Marjorie for about 30 minutes. But yeah, we're going to just go ahead and jump right in, not wasting any time tonight. How's everybody doing?
Good.
I'm doing good. Thank you, Misty.
David's muted here real quick. Before we jump into everything, though, I do have to point out that we are crowdfunding to try and get back to Washington, D.C. for all 3 weeks of Julian's rendition hearing. And we have a GoFundMe up for that. We are a little bit over 30% of the way to our goal, and I want to thank everyone who is donated to that. You guys are wonderful. If you can, please continue to do so. If not, please share the link, because that does help as well. And without any further delay, over the last week and a half, I suppose, maybe 2 weeks, we've kind of been dissecting this superseding indictment that the Department of Justice brought forth, not to Vanessa Baraitser, not to Julian Assange's legal team, but to the U.S. media, and released this indictment through the media. And Marjorie, I am curious as to what your thoughts are about this, and I am also curious as to the legality of what they're trying to do by expanding the scope of this conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge.
Yes, well, there has been so much criticism that Julian Assange is being targeted because he's a journalist and the freedom of the press has been violated. In fact, during the Obama administration, they actually refrained from bringing any charges against Julian Assange for fear it would set a precedent, because many newspapers, including the New York Times, the UK Guardian, Der Spiegel, Le Monde, did exactly what WikiLeaks did, and published exactly what WikiLeaks did. And so they were worried about setting a precedent. So given that criticism, and given the fact that the extradition hearing will continue and presumably conclude in September, they didn't bring any additional charges in this superseding indictment. They expanded the scope, as you said, of the conspiracy to commit computer fraud, so that they could paint Julian Assange as a hacker, not as a journalist, to try to deflect the criticism of his prosecution, of his indictment and extradition, and hopefully not, but they would hope eventual prosecution. Now, what they did in this superseding indictment was to allege that Julian actively recruited hackers to provide WikiLeaks with documents, and allegedly communicated with a leader of the hacking group LULSEC and provided a list of targets for that group to hack. What happened was that there was an FBI agent, an undercover FBI agent, talking to Julian Assange, and the U.S. authorities, with the agreement of the Icelandic government, the U.S. authorities created fake classified documents for this undercover agent to feed to Assange. That, to me, as a criminal defense attorney for many years, raises a red flag of entrapment. And I don't know, how that would play out. I don't know what the evidence is, but what it looks like to me from reading this superseding indictment is that Julian Assange, assuming that he's extradited to the United States, assuming that he goes to trial on this indictment, could raise the defense of entrapment. And so once again, they didn't bring any extra charges against him. The same charges, which carry 175 years in prison, are there, but they expanded the scope of the allegation of conspiracy so that they could say, oh, he's just a hacker. He's not a journalist. This is not a First Amendment issue.
And that's incredibly sad to me because he's someone that has won, at least from my understanding, more journalism awards than anyone else in the world. He's literally released more classified information than all other media institution combined. And it's literally...
Andrew?
He's cutting out.
Okay.
Rhythm?
But while we're waiting on Andrew to come back in here, I have a couple of questions specifically about entrapment. The way that I understand it is that there's two parts to it that you have to prove in court to make it entrapment. And I may have this wrong. I'm not a legal scholar, nor have I been a practicing criminal defense attorney. That's why we have you on, so we can ask you this stuff. But the way that I looked at it was that you had to prove that the government was responsible for coercing you into committing a crime, and then B, you have to be able to prove that were it not for the government coercing you to commit this crime, that you would not have done it, and do not have any prior criminal behavior in your past. Is that correct, or is it one or the other?
Well, you even if you have a criminal record, that does not mean you can't raise the entrapment defense. It could be that your criminal record relates to other kinds of offenses, and that would the whole issue with entrapment is whether or not the defendant had the predisposition to commit the crime, or whether the government created that predisposition in the defendant, and the defendant doesn't even have to admit that he actually committed the crime in order to raise a defense of entrapment. But because of this undercover FBI agent and them creating these false documents, that to me raises the red flag of entrapment. Again, I don't know if A, he would even raise that as a defense, or B, whether or not it would be successful, but I think it's definitely something that should be explored.
Something I also wanted to ask you about too, and I'm sure you've probably been asked this before, but it seems kind of weird that Julian Assange, who's an Australian citizen, and WikiLeaks, which is, not a United States-based company or publication, it seems strange to me that the United States has any jurisdictional power to even ask for extradition. What is there precedence for the United States being able to go after a journalist of another country just because he embarrassed them?
The United States can try foreign nationals the same way that other countries can try U.S. nationals. The question is, can they get jurisdiction over him? And will this extradition be successful? So what's happening is that the Trump administration filed this indictment. This is actually the second superseding indictment that they filed. The last one was in 2019. And the Trump administration is asking the court in the UK to extradite Julian Assange for trial on this indictment. Now, there is a treaty between the United States and the UK, an extradition treaty. It's a 2003 extradition treaty, and it says extradition shall not be granted if the offense for which extradition is requested is a political offense. So if it's a political offense that Julian Assange would be extradited to the United States to stand trial for, then under this treaty between the US and the UK, he can't be extradited. And it's the UK that determines whether or not the request by the United States was politically motivated. Now, there's no clear definition of political offense, but it routinely includes treason, sedition, and espionage. You know, he's charged under the Espionage Act. Even though that is absurd, the way that Dan Ellsberg was charged under the Espionage Act, who also that was also absurd, and he actually won his case eventually. But routinely, political offenses include treason, sedition, espionage, and offenses directed against state power. So what did Julian Assange do? He exposed war crimes by the US government. That's why they want him so badly. In 2010 and 2011, WikiLeaks published documents that were provided to him by, or to WikiLeaks by Chelsea Manning. They contain 90,000 reports about the war in Afghanistan, including the Afghan war logs, which documented more civilian casualties by coalition forces than the US military had previously admitted to. They published nearly 400,000 field reports about the Iraq War, which contained evidence of US war crimes, over 15,000 previously unreported deaths of Iraqi civilians, and the systematic murder, torture, rape, and abuse by the Iraqi army and authorities that were ignored by the US forces. And of course, that included the infamous collateral murder video, which I'm sure you've been talking about. And then there's the Guantanamo files, 779 secret reports that revealed the US government's systematic violation of the Geneva Conventions and the Convention Against Torture by abusing nearly 800 men and boys ages 14 to 89. Now, there is also another ground in the law to prevent Julian Assange from being extradited, and that is the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, which has a provision called non-refoulement, and that forbids extradition to a country where there is substantial grounds to believe the person would be in danger of being tortured. Given the fact that Chelsea Manning was tortured when she was in custody awaiting trial, 23 hours a day she was kept in solitary confinement, and she was made to stand nude for inspection, and that amounted to torture and cruel treatment. And the UN Special Rapporteur Niles Meltzer said that Julian Assange was showing signs, this is even last year, of prolonged psychological torture from being in the embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy in London, having some serious health issues, but the UK government would not allow him to go to a hospital and be treated without arresting him, and he was, of course, under a grant of asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. And so these conditions got much worse. And in fact, now in the Belmarsh prison in London, Julian Assange and his lawyers have made this argument, is in great danger of contracting the COVID-19, the coronavirus. Because although he is also in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, solitary confinement, by the way, is well established that it's torture. But that other hour, he's exercising with 40 other inmates in a very enclosed space. There have been staff at the prison who have COVID-19, and the fact that he has these serious pulmonary respiratory condition, given the refusal of the UK government to allow him to be treated when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, he is in danger of being tortured. Now, when his lawyers made this argument and said that he should be released from prison, released on bail, because he is in danger of contracting the coronavirus, the judge, prejudging the case, said that there is a high risk of extradition. She's basically tipping her hand and saying, well, looks to me like there's a high risk that he's going to be extradited. and we think he's a flight risk, and so they denied bail. He's been denied the right to meet with his lawyers, and he's so ill that the last time they had an administrative hearing, he was unable even to appear by video conference because he's so ill. So there are all these reasons why extradition should be denied. But of course, we know that the government of the UK and the government of the United States are thick as thieves and partners in crime. You know, going back way back. But a recent example is when Tony Blair and George W. Bush illegally invaded Iraq, changed the regime, and started a war that continues to kill people. And there have been estimates that 1 million people have died from that war. So he really should not be extradited to the United States for these trumped up charges. That does not mean that he won't be. And the extradition hearing continues September 7th. It may go on, his extradition hearing may go on for 3 weeks. It's unclear whether it will even happen in September because of the virus and because of the difficulty of getting witnesses for the prosecution and the defense, for that matter, to travel and appear.
I believe they're going to allow some defendants to meet over, or not defendants, witnesses to meet over video link. But you had mentioned earlier about how Julian is unwell. This is actually going on since, I believe, about May, that Julian hasn't been able to attend any of the court hearings or anything because he's listed as part.
Do we lose Andrew again?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Andrew's been getting his interwebs attacked tonight.
Kevin.
I'm genuinely amazed that we've been able to carry on this show for 54 consecutive weeks with as minimal interruptions as we've actually had in the long run. It's surprising.
Would you be able to throw a mute on Mr. McBride for a minute?
Sure.
Just because it's picking up his car audio.
Yeah, and then David, whatever. If you can still hear us, I'm gonna mute you for a moment, but you'll have to unmute yourself to come back in.
And please jump in at any time, because I actually wanted to talk to Mrs. Cohn about your case as well and what's going on over there.
Why don't we just do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
We got 12 minutes left with Marjorie.
So I don't know if you're aware of David's situation, but he's a whistleblower out of Australia. He's a soldier that revealed basically that the Australian government was politicizing the war in Afghanistan for their benefit of the political candidates and political races, and basically that it wasn't in any way to do with the war, and they were essentially just sacrificing Australians for PR events. And he revealed this to the mainstream media over there, and the Australian broadcasting company, ABC, was actually raided by federal authorities. They had documents taken directly out of their offices. I believe there has been some arrests made in regards to this as well. So I was just wondering if you could weigh in a little bit on David's situation.
Well, I'm sorry to say I'm not familiar with it, but it doesn't surprise me since the Australian government, like the U.S. government, like the UK government, have been eager to go after whistleblowers and cover up war crimes. And of course, we have a number of whistleblowers who were targeted during the Obama administration. I think he went after whistleblowers in an unprecedented manner. His administration did not file charges against Julian Assange, thankfully, but certainly did go after Chelsea Manning, although he commuted her sentence as he was leaving office after she had served 7 years, but certainly did go after a number of whistleblowers. So perhaps you could give me more details about what David has he been arrested? Are there charges pending against him? What is the situation?
Yeah,
so David, if you can unmute and just kind of give Marjorie the Cliff's Notes version of what's been going on with you. You gotta tap the phone screen and then the microphone and the phone icon and the camera icon will show up. There you are.
Got it. Yep. Okay, Marjorie. I have been charged. I was charged first in 2018 with one count of theft of government documents, and then I think because I didn't plead guilty, the charges were moved up to 5 charges with an unlimited possible jail term, so life imprisonment, and they relate to espionage offences as well, national security, but it's really effectively espionage. And there has been some recent developments. The trial is set down for later this year, and more things, more instances of war crimes are coming out, and it seems like what was happening was the Australian government was trying to cover up systematic war crimes, very embarrassing in instances where some of their most famous soldiers committed war crimes. And they were trying to cover that up desperately. And it's now coming out, and it's very embarrassing for the Australian government. It's not unlike the WikiLeaks case.
So other whistleblowers are also revealing evidence of Australian war crimes in addition to what you revealed?
Yes. And in fact, it looks like what I saw was the cover-up where they were doing a lot of very strange things, prosecuting people who hadn't done anything in order to cover up the fact that they knew some people had blatantly murdered innocent people just for the hell of it.
So are other whistleblowers charged as well as you are?
No, I'm the only one that charged, and that's one of the strange things. The journalist who published my documents may be charged. The police have prepared a case against him. That it's a political decision about whether or not he's actually charged. And the other whistleblowers haven't been charged. I think because, unlike me, they haven't embarrassed the government. I say that there was a bigger cover-up, whereas the people who just witnessed war crimes, the government are able to sort of blame the soldiers. But I think the problem was much bigger than that. In Watergate terms, I think it's, it's not just about the burglary, it's about what happened higher up.
Do you think that they might be trying to, and again, I'm just asking because I don't know the details. Do you think that the reason that they have not filed charges against the person who published what you revealed is because they're trying to turn him, make a deal, and have him snitch on you? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think that they did get to them beforehand because that journalist didn't publish the full story that I gave him. He very much published a convenient story for the government, like it was all the soldiers' fault, all the people at the very bottom of the tree. And I suspected some government interference in that, and that's why I thought that there was it's strange that I'm being charged and not him. He can't snitch on me in the sense that I've admitted, as a tactical thing, I admitted I gave him the documents. My defense is that I was justified because of the criminal nature of the government's actions. So there's nothing more to be said in that regard. In fact, it would seem very strange not to charge him because he's owned the story. The story's still on the internet. There's no doubt, and I've confessed that they're my documents, that they were used. So it's not clear what else the government would need to prove. It's just really a matter of political convenience.
And you have not been in the military, the Australian military.
I was a member of the military, yeah. So I guess I'm a bit in terms of Julian Assange's case, I'm a bit like Chelsea Manning, in that I was a legal officer. I had access to the files, and I could see things were going very wrong over there. And I leaked the documents as a serving soldier in the Australian Army.
Well, I'm not familiar with Australian law, but in U.S. law, under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, a service member has a duty to obey lawful orders, and that means orders that comply with the Constitution and the laws of the United States. But under the Army Field Manual and the Nuremberg Principles, which would apply to you, regardless of Australian law, there is a duty to disobey unlawful orders, and an order not to reveal evidence of war crimes is an unlawful order. I don't know if this is something that your defense team is exploring, but that may be something that you might want to consider for your defense.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Funnily enough, while we know of that principle, and all those principles apply in Australia as well, they're not emphasising it enough. They're looking for a statutory defence. I agree with you. I would rather go to trial on the fact that it was my duty to do what I did. And in fact, one of the elements of the main offences is that what I did was not my duty. And I want to use that phrase and say, actually, it was exactly my duty, and attack them that way, because I think that will put them in a more awkward position. But you've got some good ideas. Are you available in November to come and help me with my trial?
Now, if I remember right, David, you tried to go through official channels for all of
I was just gonna say that, Steve.
You tried to do it by the book, as it were, and were rebuffed at every turn by higher ups.
Very similar to Chelsea.
Very similar. Yeah, I saw problems in 2013. I didn't go to the press, the ABC, until 2016. And in the meantime, I complained to everyone I could possibly complain to. It's my own case that I'm biased, but it's pretty shoddy. The whole thing is because I did follow all the rules. I was very much a true believer. And yet here I am facing life in prison.
Yes, so you did go through the channels,
Yeah.
and nothing happened. I don't know, again, the ins and outs of your defense, but it may be that the statutory defense is not contradictory to the defense we were talking about, and that is a duty to obey unlawful orders, and an order not to reveal war crimes is an unlawful order.
Yeah, and I'd like to keep it simple like that. The problem with the statutory defence is it's quite complex, and you can be substantially within it, but still fail because of the minor, details. You didn't complain to the right person or something like that. So I don't really want to go with that. In fact, I'd rather go to jail on the big issues than be acquitted on some sort of technicality from a statutory thing, because I want the big issues to be considered.
You can raise the big issues, but quite frankly, if you get acquitted, that's a major victory, regardless of why you're acquitted.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I feel when you're a soldier in the army and you see disgraceful behaviour by your, everything you believed in being trashed, it really makes you very angry, and you really just think, well, I'm going to fight this till the end, because it really hurt me to see that we had become the bad guys.
Well, whistleblowers are very threatening to governments, as we know, and they also want to make an example of you. They don't want other people to be revealing evidence of criminal behavior by the Australian government in the future. And so if they come down hard on you, that will presumably, in their minds, deter other people from becoming whistleblowers as well. And I think that that may be one of their overriding concerns.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right in that, because the charges don't really make sense, in the sense that they are espionage charges, and they clearly are things like giving information to the enemy, basically. And it's very oldie worldy. It's a bit like, giving the enemy the plans to the secret fortress. And I clearly haven't done that, unless you call the Australian people the enemy. And there's no question of any sort of international involvement. But the reality behind it is they want to make an example of me. That's
Yes.
right.
Exactly. Well, good luck to you. And I salute you for your courage.
Thank you. We might get you to be a witness, even if you do it by Zoom.
I'll check my busy calendar.
Marjorie, I know you got to cut out here fairly shortly, so I wanted to thank you for being here on the vigil with us tonight. We all of us here have an enormous amount of respect for you, and every time that we see you on a panel, it just underscores our want to get you on the vigil. So it's been absolutely delightful. Do you have anything coming up that you would like to promote or anything like that? Are you going to be a part of another Don't Extradite Assange campaign thing, or on Consortium News Live anytime soon? What's going on in the world of Marjorie Cohn?
Well, I am very involved in this new committee to defend Julian Assange and the freedom of the press. And we don't quite have a website yet. We're working through the Courage Foundation, but we have had monthly webinars, which we will continue to have, and I've spoken on a number of them. And so hopefully we can get that information to you, and perhaps you can put out the word. Because of course Julian needs that support. And I really want to thank you for having me on. I'm really honored to be part of the vigil. So thanks a lot.
Oh yeah, and we'll be happy to help plug whatever. And fairly often we are simultaneously streaming the Courage Foundation events on our separate channels, just to kind of make sure that as many eyeballs and ears as possible can get on these things, because we are down to 55 days before this rendition takes place.
Wow.
We got kind of lectured at by a French activist named Victor Dedesh, who reminded us to stop using the language of our oppressors, and that this is in fact not an extradition hearing. It is a broad daylight kidnapping that is going to take place at the Old Bailey in London beginning September 7th. So it really is, it's like a very slow moving extraordinary rendition that they're trying to accomplish by silencing Julian Assange, and we are going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that doesn't happen.
When you say extraordinary rendition, the passage that I cited from the Convention Against Torture, the non-refoulement provision is really against extradition. And of course, the U.S. government was notorious for rendering so-called terrorism suspects to Guantanamo, to the CIA black sites for torture. And that's what that provision of the Convention Against Torture forbids. And that is rendering, the rendition, or sending or extraditing a person to another country where there are substantial grounds to believe he would be in danger of being tortured. And that's precisely what would happen if the UK government grants the US government's request to extradite Julian Assange to the United States.
Can't say it more fair than that. Well, okay. Well, thank you so much. All you need to do to close out of here is just close out of the browser, and hopefully we can have another conversation with you before we are all off to Washington, D.C. in September.
That sounds great, and keep up the great work. It's critical what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Marjorie.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Marjorie Cohn, ladies and gentlemen. I'm
She's awesome.
I'm a little starstruck. I gotta
know.
say, man. You usually get that way with guests.
When you told me who the guests were today, I was like, holy cow, y'all.
Interviewed some fairly high profile people in my day, but that was just goddamn Christmas right there. It was.
So David, if you could talk for a minute just about like the overall feeling in the Australian military, if you've had any people to connect to about your case, and if there are murmurs or rumors or different opinions that you've heard from other soldiers that you know.
A lot of people were trying to hint to me about the fact that a lot of pretty nasty war crimes were about to come out, and that would help me. But we're getting into a pretty dystopian society, in that a lot of people who even probably support me in the military won't contact me because they know my phones are tapped, and they know that they don't want their numbers coming up in connection with me, because they could lose their security clearance just for having any kind of contact with me, and that's pretty scary.
That's absolutely horrifying. And on top of that, to piggyback off the surveillance, we have the expansion of the corona states around the world, the COVID-19 84 laws that are rolling out. And here in the US, actually, across a large portion of the country, we have mandatory masks or still forced closures of companies and businesses. So I know it's not necessarily on topic, but what are you seeing as far as surveillance state expansion over in Australia in response to coronavirus?
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. I mean, they had this, you probably have it in America. They wanted everybody to download an app, the government did, on their phone, which could track your every movement. Not that they can't do that already, but there's been no limit to any kind of surveillance expansion under COVID, because there's so much hysteria out here. And while there's been a few voices saying, are you sure we should do that? They've just been drowned out. It's pretty dystopian out here now. Yeah, the government pretty much has power to do anything, whenever. They can track you, they can surveil you, and they might say, oh, it's to do with COVID. But of course, as you can see in my case, I'm being prosecuted. I'm clearly not a spy, and yet I'm being prosecuted as a spy. And there's no adult supervision in the government or the security services to say, well, he's not a spy, he's just a critic of the government. And so they would, in likewise terms, they wouldn't be able to say, well, are you investigating COVID or are you investigating critics of the government? Because there isn't anybody who makes that decision. But now they have the power to pretty much do whatever they want.
Well, the crazy thing about the Corona app, and I'm almost positive that it's Australia that has the software. The software is from Palantir. It's Peter Thiel's software. And Peter Thiel now has Corona software, tracking, tracing, storing it all in a database in 3 of the Five Eyes countries. He's got it here in the US, in the UK, and in Australia. And I'm pretty sure that he won't be completely happy until that software is something that permeates the globe. We are watching, and we are living through, and a lot of us are pushing back against what all of these simulated exercises that have taken place over the last 20 years have predicted, and that is the transformation of the West into a post-pandemic police state.
Look, I'm glad you brought up.
I want to know if there's a sense of that in Australia, or if just the propaganda permeates so thickly that people are just like, oh yeah, no, sure, I'll give up every inch of my privacy as long as that virus with a 99.8% survival rate doesn't get me.
Yeah, that's that's exactly right. Now, I'm afraid that there's not enough pushback. There's a few, just like the States, there's a few voices like yourselves, and thank God you guys do what you do. Most people are just compliant. In fact, if you change the imagery a bit, we are already in the dystopian state here. Well, we had a guy who was a bit like me. He was an ex-army soldier who was working for the security services, and he got put in jail secretly under an assumed name, and even the head of the prison didn't know who he really was. And even some judges in Australia were pretty outraged by that. They didn't know we could have secret trials and assume names and lock people away. There was no oversight to that at all. And as far as we know, there's a few. There's more. But I'm glad you mentioned Five Eyes before I get carried away, because Five Eyes is becoming we agreed to that without really knowing what it was. And one thing that came out in my case, in one of the early hearings, the prosecutor said, we need to get permission from our strategic partners about how we're going to run this case. And even the judge was like, what? What are you talking about? And the prosecutor said, had to be drawn out of them, but basically they had to get permission from the US government to run my case. Now, my case has got nothing to do with the US government. Tangentially it has, but I mean, it's not really their concern. And that's because of Five Eyes. And while Five Eyes is meant to be some sort of partnership of equals, I'm pretty sure Australia doesn't get a say in US prosecutions, but it looks like Five Eyes is a vehicle for the US to reach into the national security of other nations and pretty much run it. I don't think people in Australia, they don't really understand that. And I think if they understood that someone like Mike Pompeo is running things out here, they wouldn't be very happy.
So I don't know if you're aware or not, but Susie Dawson, who a friend of the show, is co-hosted with us, mentor to Taylor, and targeted journalist and activist. She had a whole YouTube series called One versus Five Eyes, and it is so well put together and so incredibly detailed. If you haven't, it's worth going back and watching all of those episodes, because she breaks down with like a wonderful slide presentation and everything, just how this global intelligence sharing network operates, and scales it down to the two eyes, which is the US and the UK and the US and Israel, up through, I believe she covers like up to 40 something eye. Like it's ridiculous how many intelligence agencies the United States is either outright running or has multiple fingers and multiple pies in. It's like a fucking hydra. It's just...
It's like how Julian described in the intro to Cypherpunks, I believe, that nation states are no longer determined by physical boundaries and lines in the sand. They're determined by encryption. And the mere existence of these global intelligence apparatuses throughout every single nation is case in point of that, to where they exist under a wall of encryption to protect themselves, and then people that would want to voice concerns about the fact that they exist have to exist behind encryption, so that way everything they do isn't just broadcast to them without any difficulty of retrieving.
Yeah, look, I agree with that, and that's one of the having worked inside the security apparatus and having the highest possible security clearance. I've seen that monolith, and this is one of the depressing things about Julian Assange's rendition hearing. but it is really a rendition here, in that it's not as if the UK are really thinking about whether or not they're going to honour an American extradition request. It's the same freaking country as far as national security goes, and Julian Assange has committed offences against the Five Eyes monolith, and he's not going to get any real fair hearing in the UK, because it's really the same. People will be coming to the judge, unknown, deep state people will be saying he's got to go, and if the judge says, well, that's not lawful, they'll say it's national security, it really is important, and they'll have to comply, as if it was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. There won't really be there's no distinction. As I said, there's no adult supervision between a journalist and someone who's actually quite dangerous. But I agree that I'll have a watch of Susie's stuff because it sounds good.
It's definitely worth it. I do actually have a really good question from our chat for you. Walter asked, it seems very clear there won't be adequate whistleblower protection anytime soon. In hindsight, would you prefer to have leaked your info to WikiLeaks instead of going to ABC? And I actually have like a quick little add-on to that. I know that you had said that you, about, even just 5 years ago, you would have never predicted you would be in the situation you were in. And I'm just kind of curious how aware you were. We talked earlier about your case being so similar to Chelsea's. How aware were you of the Chelsea Manning leaks, and what kind of was your opinion on that before you found yourself kind of in a similar situation? So kind of a two-pronged question there. Sorry.
You're muted, David.
Oh, yep.
It is funny, and I imagine Chelsea would say the same, and I think Edward Snowden, from my knowledge, would say the same. You don't become a whistleblower overnight. You do believe in what you're doing, and it takes a few, because you can always see it's possibly there's a misunderstanding and your people are in the right, but it's when you see things which are irrefutably lies that you start to turn. And when you start to turn, you realize that a lot of things where you gave the benefit of the doubt to are probably lies as well. So you end up turning in a big way. This happened recently to me when there was a famous soldier who I was kind of supporting because I hadn't seen any evidence of him being a war criminal. And then I came across a piece of evidence which is actually tangentially in my case, which proved conclusively that he was lying when he said, someone just died of natural causes, because he said that they were shot as a suspected insurgent, and a medic said, no, we were treating the guy, and anyway, long story, but it's quite clear now that the guy I thought might have been okay kicked this Afghan civilian to death, and it's witnessed by somebody else. Now I need to go back through everything that guy said and look at it very strongly, because I know, because of hard evidence, that he lied about one murder. So and that's a bit the same with when you're a whistleblower. When you see that your government is absolutely lying about something. Collateral murder was obviously, it got people's attention, but I could see that that's not actually the biggest thing that was revealed by any means. But even if but it is attention grabbing. And I guess as a whistleblower, the problem is getting attention. Now, your original question is, should I have gone to WikiLeaks? Well, probably not, because I don't think it would have been noticed. I remember speaking to it would have been noticed by people like you, but not by the average person. And the tragedy of WikiLeaks, I think, and of Snowden's revelations, is that not enough people really understand what was revealed. despite the fact that it's clear as day to us. They still somehow kind of think Julian's a lot of people think he's some sort of bad guy, and they never have a second's thought to the nefarious activities of the state players. It's almost laughable. But I did, funnily enough, I did use WikiLeaks to get the US rules of engagement in Iraq, which even Australians couldn't get. It's such a funny one-way relationship when the US government is your friend, because they don't give you anything, but they expect you to give everything. So I was aware of WikiLeaks, and gradually I could see it was a good thing. And I certainly always had sympathy for Chelsea Manning, just because I could see, like me, they were a true believer. And like Snowden, who's always, despite the way he's portrayed, he said, I believed in the Constitution of the United States. And that struck a chord with me, because I knew then that this was not some sort of a group who were trying to overthrow democracy. They were trying to reinstate democracy.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad that Andrew had talked about the opening to cypherpunks here, because the last sentence in cypherpunks in the opening is, our task is to secure self-determination where we can, to hold back the coming dystopia where we cannot, and if all else fails, to accelerate its self-destruction. And I'm even just now reading that, I got some goosebumps going on, because it's one of those declarative statements that the thing that I really enjoy about Julian Assange as an individual is that there is no gray area. He's not muddying the waters in case he has to tap dance around later. He just comes right out and says what needs to be said. And I feel like accelerating the self-destruction of a megalomaniacal, sociopathic, just all-encompassing surveillance state, a pretty good goal. And if this show in any way can help that, man, I'm stoked for that. I hope that that more and more people now are talking. I know that you have chatted with the people from Consortium News Live, David. I'm glad that your story is picking up some traction. There was a question in the chat as to what is the best way that Aussies can support you. And if you want to field that, I did throw a link to your GoFundMe in the chat. And maybe we can get it put up on the screen at some point during the vigil tonight. Yeah, how can people in Australia support David McBride?
Yeah, the GoFundMe is a good one, and anything you can donate is very helpful, because it's not just donating a little bit of money, but it helps with awareness, and also just I'm pretty active on Twitter. Get on Twitter, David McBride, and circulate stuff. If we can get awareness, because linking back into what Steve said, one of my plan B, I guess, is to go to jail. And as long as a lot of people know about the case, that will be good, because to quote, to reference that beautiful phrase that Steve just quoted, I can see it blowing up in my face, their face, putting, the more that comes out about my case, the worse it will be for the government. And that's why I don't want to get acquitted quietly on the technicality. I want it to be loud, because it'll give an opportunity for the whole edifice to blow up when people see that we are no longer the good guys of the Western world, and we seem to be, lying, cheating, and all our public statements are false. Good people are put in jail on trumped-up charges, and that will eventually sink in, and sort of all I really want is a good spotlight. So if you can just spread the word and stay interested, and sending me good wishes always helps. I'm so grateful to you, Steve, because I do get quite down, and I do, while we are doing the right thing, it's very lonely. And to hear your enthusiasm, you've got to keep it up. To hear you say, I'm loving fighting the beast. It makes me so happy.
Steve's a masochist, though. Steve is a masochist.
The more I convince myself that it's great fun to fight the beast, the better I'll be.
I have an old lady friend who's been doing activism to the point now that her body is broken down and she's basically bedridden, more or less. But I was talking with her about everything we do here and what we're trying to accomplish. And I described it as literally looking the beast that humanity created in the eyes and telling it to sit long enough that you can get everyone out of the room before it attacks them. So I think describing it in that way is the best reference of the Hydra, because this is a many-headed beast.
It is.
Ray McGovern calls it the Mickey Map.
One of the phrases I used again was similar, and it rung true with me. Some of the other whistleblowers, they want the charges dropped, but I'm saying, no, I don't want the charges dropped, because if you're going to kill this dragon, you need to fight it. And if it slinks off into the jungle, it's going to come back. But you're absolutely right. You need to kind of do a bit of a Beowulf and get inside it and stab it from the inside.
So, and I just want to say, since this is the first time I'm speaking to you kind of in person, just thank you, because I can't imagine how much courage it takes to do what you did. And and I have people who know me know I have an unbelievable amount of respect and gratitude for whistleblowers. But kind of piggybacking off of that, I was wondering how much you may have learned from watching other whistleblowers. You said you wanted to go at this loud. You wanted, really fight them. Did you learn anything from watching how they've handled Julian Assange over the past decade, or how they've handled Chelsea Manning over the past decade? Have you seen the kind of approach that, the U.S. government has taken in that respect? And did you kind of recognize, sort of how you needed to go about fighting this in your own country?
I didn't really think about it, because I was just like, this is wrong. And like a lot of whistleblowers I've read about, particularly in America, there's a great book called Crisis of Conscience, which you should get if you haven't read it. And it deals with everybody from Ellsberg to the, nuclear whistleblowers, etc. And I got a lot of courage from that, and there's a lot of similarities between whistleblowers. And normally they just start off because they just say, there's a line in the sand here, and we've crossed it. In relation to Julian and the lessons, I have to admit, I was fooled a lot by the very successful smear campaign that the Western media have managed to put out about him. The more I hear about it, the more real things I hear about him, the more I admire him. And that's one of the things that scares me about him, is that they have successfully, so many people don't like him, conservatives, middle of the road, without really knowing why. And I've suffered a bit of a similar smear campaign, and that the power that effectively the governments and their corporate backers have to totally change the narrative on someone who is undoubtedly a very, very good person is quite scary. And Bradley Money was the same. that all sorts of irrelevant stuff about them she not being, or Chelsea Manning not being a good person, came out, and with Chelsea, I just saw her quiet courage and determination come through and that really impressed me. I think other whistleblowers, just knowing there's other people out there really helps you. And you have to fight it your own way, but it is a lonely path. And I can't say how much it is your support, the US support, the people, Steve and you guys, it really helped me. It really gave me a shot in the arm. And I did my first Zoom call half asleep. And afterwards, I felt, that was amazing. I felt like I'd had a shot of adrenaline. I just thought I can do this. And so don't discount the power that we all have. Not everybody can be whistleblowers because you don't always have that strong information, but everybody who supports whistleblowers is part of the fight, part of the army, part of the solution. In fact, we don't have to win majority support, but as long as we've got a strong cadre who help each other, we will be okay. And all I want to do now, after this is over, is to go and see you guys in the States and build that our army, I guess, and hang out with each other, because you're the only people I really want to associate with now.
I was telling my boss at work today that, like, I feel weird in other settings because most of the people that I talk to are targeted activists, targeted whistleblowers, targeted journalists, or people in independent media that are, obviously being bugged on some level and surveilled on some level. And I don't know how to communicate to, like, regular people who just want fucking small talk. Like, it was never me anyway, but to try and, like, I don't know, go hang out in a fucking, like, park or a bar or something like that. I can't go to lunch without jumping, like hearing a snippet of a conversation and being like, oh really? Because and just kind of laying it all out there. And David, we love the hell out of you here at Action for Assange, and we want to see right done by you. There was a follow-up question in the chat to how can Aussies best support you, and it was will people be allowed to support you when you go back to court for this thing, like physically in the courtroom or in front of the courthouse?
I had a bit of sound problem there. I don't know if you're getting me.
We are, yeah.
It's it will be an open court. That will be really helpful. The more people that can come to the court case, it's in Canberra. It's not that hard to get to. And I'd be happy to have people. That will be powerful. That gets the message across. And the media have been quite good. They cover the protests outside the courtroom. There have been protests outside the courtroom every time I've appeared. They've been growing bigger, and they do get filmed. And I think that would be powerful, because sometimes the media in Australia anyway, they do give up, and they do see that you are truly a popular figure amongst everyday Australians. It is possible to swing them around, and they might start saying, we've got to support this guy because people like him. And I think that's one of I won quite a few friends at the beginning when I came out of the courtroom, and I wasn't legally represented then, so I wasn't trying to be politically correct and be careful. And I just told it like it is and said, we've got big problems in this country. The government is totally corrupt. They're sacrificing soldiers, etc. And people liked it. because they liked it because it wasn't stage managed. It wasn't it wasn't the usual talking points. I wasn't saying, oh, I'm not going to comment. And even though I didn't look that great, for the average Australian, they don't care because they're like, oh, this guy's a real person. And yeah, so if we can get real people to come down outside the court case, the press will probably interview you, and we can start getting a message out there to say real Australians support real Australians, you know, and I think there's a chance we can get up with that.
I know from watching all of the Assange vigils that take place globally on, you know, certain key days, especially this July 3rd over Julian's birthday. We had a coordinated, I want to say, like, close to 40 or 45 different events in 16 countries on 5 continents. And Australia and New Zealand really turned out for Julian. So it's my hope that by, you know, that by continuing to have you on these vigils, that you will be able to then, you know, make other contacts from different people with other different platforms, and that you can help, you know, proliferate your message and tell your story to a wider and wider audience, so that by the time your hearing comes up, there will be a large presence in your favor, in your corner, both in the courtroom and out in front of it. We should probably start including your statistics when we run through everything. When we do our calls to action that go up on the website every week, more often than not, we stick in the GoFundMes of people who are being targeted or who are being put through I don't know, unnecessary or ridiculous court trial. So yours is a part of that, and so is Elizabeth Mueller and a number of other people. And yeah, man, I you know, I'm an activist, so around the dead black heart is this, you know, little center of hope. Otherwise I couldn't do it. You know, I'd just be like, fuck it, surveil me, and I'm gonna go to Walmart, you know? Like, it would just, I would be a fucking mook, and I would probably hate it. But I hold out a fairly high level of hope, because what you did is what anyone with a conscience and means, and by means, I don't mean monetary, but by the ability to contact the press. That's the only means that you need to be a whistleblower. You need a conscience, and you need to be able to get a hold of someone who will print your story. And that's basically it. Now, you want to go through an institution or an outlet that has, you know, a proven track record of source protection, and the ability to then extend their means, their resources to your defense if it comes out that you were the whistleblower. But that's really neither here nor there for what we're talking about. Yeah, I do. I hold out a fairly high level of hope for your case there, David. I do.
Well, it's good to hear you say that, and your optimism is not totally misplaced, because especially the developments in the past week about you know, more and more, they're not in war, they're murders. And particularly because there was this guy that I've referred to called Ben Robert Smith, and he was the sort of all-Australian hero who got awarded all these medals, like the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor. And it turns out he was actually murdering people and claiming them as battle casualties. But it's also pretty clear that he could not have done that without the command, without the sort of generals knowing it. But it's a bit like tail wag the dog. They needed a hero. They made a hero. They didn't care whether he really was a hero or not. It served their purposes. And this will be so embarrassing. And this is a bit like collateral murder. It's not the worst thing that happened, but it's caught the public's imagination. Now, the whole edifice, this could be like the crack in the damn wall. If it can be linked back to the generals, and I think it can, a lot will happen, and that will could be the domino effect that goes back to Julian Assange and say, how can we say this guy's a bad guy when he exposed the same thing? Cover-ups, politically motivated false messaging, wars started over lies. I mean, that's another. It's so hypocritical in Australia. It's well known now by, it's established by our most trusted investigative journalists that the weapons of mass destruction thing was not a mistake. It was a lie in order to go into a war that they decided that would be good for America. Now, Julian, and those people who get awards and whatever, Julian's revelations are the same sort of thing, and yet somehow he's a bad guy. And I also thought there was a little bit of a turning, whatever you think of Rudy Giuliani. I saw he was quoted this week saying, what's the difference between the Pentagon Papers being published by the Washington Post and Julian Assange publishing the diplomatic cables, etc. It's the same thing. And so I do think we can win this. Which is great. I dare to hope, but I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah, I forgot to ask Marjorie when she was on, but we actually last summer, a Ninth Circuit Court judge dismissed with prejudice a lawsuit that the Democratic National Committee brought forth against Julian Assange and against WikiLeaks, and also against Vladimir Putin and the entire Russian government and a number of 7 stray cats and somebody's goat. They were out to sue someone. They really were. And this judge, who was appointed by Bill Clinton, so it's not like there's a serious partisan bent to the judge. He was a Clinton appointee, dismisses the suit with prejudice, specifically citing the Pentagon Papers as to, yes, WikiLeaks is a legitimate publishing outlet that deserves the exact same First Amendment protections that the Washington Post did and the New York Times did when they printed the Pentagon Papers. So we have this precedent set in a federal district court. Now, whether or not they'll be able to use that when if Julian is renditioned and brought here, that remains to be seen, because in his particular case, he'll be in the Eastern District of Virginia. It'll be an entirely closed court. His defense team won't even have access to the material being used against him by the prosecution. No reporters, no one in the gallery, all done in the dark. 100%. The jury won't even be able to have transcripts of the actual court proceedings, because the language that they're going to be using falls under the rubric of national security. So they're going to read things for example, and they're not allowed, the collateral murder isn't a part of this case, but let's take it for example. The battalion commander says, sweep on the bunnies instead of fire on the civilians. That's the kind of shit that the jury is going to have. They're going to get handed a bunch of nonsense words that completely strip away the horrors of war crimes that were committed in their name, in the name of the jury, in the name of the prosecutor, in the name of the judge. All of these war crimes were committed with zero accountability. And again, David, if I'm not right in this, then I apologize, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But the only person in Australia so far who has been charged with anything over the war crimes that you exposed are you and potentially the reporter that printed it, not the soldiers that engaged in the war crimes, nor the higher ranking officers that either instructed, approved, or looked the other way. Do I have that correct? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, no, that's correct, and it's pretty obscene when you think about it that way. I try not to get wound up, but yeah, I'm the only one, the only serving member of the military, I think, in the last 20 years, who's kind of facing major prison time, and considering all the pretty terrible things that have gone on. It is pretty obscene, and this is why I'm so grateful to you. It's great, even though this is, independent media is so important, because the facts of the matter in Julian's case, as that judge pointed out, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get in front of a judge. I quite wanted to be put on trial, because a judge, as in that DNC case that you just brought up, a judge is capable of cutting through the spin and cutting through the sort of the bullshit in the press and saying this is not right. And whereas you won't get that in the you won't get that in the media, and that's what's so dangerous. And the media are so controlled these days, as you know. And had we been living in a different time, I think even in the 70s for the the Watergate era, Julian would be a hero. They would be. It'd be so easy you wouldn't even have to be, as you said, you wouldn't even have to be a biased press. You know how they turn on celebrities, and you know how they sometimes, when they want to, you can imagine the way they could turn on the US government if they actually covered the stories in an objective way. And Julian would be getting the Congressional Medal of Honor, or if they really wanted to, if there was balanced reporting out there who said, God, what does America stand for? Who has been more in line with American values, Hillary Clinton or Julian Assange? I mean, it's pretty clear, and that's why we need independent media, because unfortunately it's gone a step further. They've realised the security services bought out the media. I was very disheartened to see only a few days ago both the Washington Post and the New York Times confirming the the sort of Russian money for the Taliban, and I thought, what? That's bad, isn't it?
Actually, you take this, Misty. I know that you've got something to say about the Russians are putting bounties on you.
Putin is my buddy. I love Putin. If you look back here, actually, I don't know if you guys can see it. There's a little heart frame picture of my buddy right over there. on the bookshelf. Yeah, that's my little Easter egg for people to find that I just totally gave away. But yeah, the Russian thing is so beyond frustrating. It's ridiculous, and that people are still talking about it after it's been embarrassingly debunked time and time again. Rachel Maddow is going to have a coronary at one of these days, and she was just pushing it again the other day with the Russian bounty story, right? Yeah, here's hoping. But I mean, she was just pushing the bounty story, just completely unsubstantiated bullshit, no facts behind it at all, and she can just say it out loud like it's a real thing.
And jump. It was the headline.
Yeah, nobody questions it. It's just that, and that's the propaganda that we've been talking about. But I was actually, while you were talking, Steve, and really while you guys were both talking, I've been working on a show. July 30th is National National Whistleblower Day. so I've been working on a show. I've been like kind of trying to figure out whistleblowing in this country and where it's come from. And when you look at the first case of whistleblowing in this country, the reaction that we had to it and the things that we did, I mean, our government paid for the defense of those two guys. They were held up and respected. And it's bizarre. And I was actually watching, I think it was like a TED talk or something. There's a lawyer, I think his name is like Stephen Cohn or something like that. But he did a TED talk where he's actually kind of the guy that figured all this out and like figured out where, because it was our first like actual whistleblower law was created after this event. And he was giving this talk and he was, saying that the politicians that they didn't care about re-election. They didn't care about lobbyists. They didn't care about, they cared about upholding. I think it was like 6 months after we had won our independence. And it was actually 10 guys who blew the whistle on their commanding officer in the Navy who was committing war crimes and torturing British prisoners of war. And so, these 10 guys got together and they wrote this letter, and one of them jumped ship to deliver it to the Continental Congress. And, the guy that they were telling on, his brother was the governor of Rhode Island, and, he had very powerful friends. And so he, sued them for criminal libel, and they got thrown in jail. And they then wrote a letter to the Continental Congress, and we defended them. We backed them. We supported them. And it's so bizarre to think that that's where we came from. That's in 1776 or 1777, it may have been, after they, blew the whistle. And then now we see ourselves in a position where Chelsea Manning's getting tortured and Julian Assange is, in this show trial nonsense clusterfuck of whatever that is. And then you have people like David who, it's insane to me that's how far we've fallen. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I just realized you're Misty Putin's buddy. I didn't know that. You're a celebrity yourself. I feel like a celebrity. But say hello to Vladimir for
My
me.
head just got really big.
Yeah, I read about that very case in the US, and I thought that was fascinating. In fact, it was almost written by Hollywood. Wasn't that great? Those guys, I think it was before the before the shooting, very early on, and I found that very heartening. Yeah, but of course, in history, we remembered well, but at the time, as you rightly pointed out, they were vilified. It's pretty terrible.
When you look at, especially with both America and Australia, because there's sort of a celebration of the outlaw, at least in terms of, I don't know, folklore. Like people still celebrate Ned Kelly in Australia, and people still celebrate like Billy the Kid and fucking just old, just straight up like murderous, drunk, poker playing, gunslinging fucking madmen are like our folk heroes, right? People who would speak truth to power and turn their nose up at the law because they were doing what they felt was right or what they felt good. Like it, and as Misty was just saying, for us to come from, okay, the government paid for the defense of these whistleblowers, to the government is torturing these whistleblowers in just a couple hundred years is a worrisome extreme different. Like it's a difference of extremes. And
And
David,
the fact that we can have a national whistleblower day in this country while having the attitudes that we have is so embarrassingly hypocritical.
Mike Pompeo,
we were celebrating that. Yeah, we were celebrating that as Chelsea Manning was being tortured. That's fucking ridiculous.
Mike Pompeo puts out this saccharine fucking tweet on International Press from World Press Freedom Day. The UK's Justice Minister put out a saccharine tweet on World Press Freedom Day. I would imagine, David, that someone in the Australian government put out just a completely nonsensical word salad of support for World Press Freedom Day, while all of these countries are actively persecuting whistleblowers and journalists who bring the truth to light. It is, you know what? It's something worth fighting against. It really is. Like, there's a lot of people that are brand new activists right now all over the world, went to their first protest or went to their first march right after Memorial Day because they saw a man get murdered in real time by a cop with his knee literally on the guy's throat. And if that's not a metaphor for what is happening to regular working people all over the planet, I'm not sure what is. But there are people that are out in the streets now for the first time. And I feel like it's our obligation to try to channel that energy into saving what's left of our First Amendment, saving what's left of a free press globally, saving what's left of free speech internationally. And I can't thank you enough, David, for having the conscience to come forward. It's
absolutely,
like, being a whistleblower to me puts you on a higher level,
on another wavelength. Absolutely.
And I'm not just trying to blow your smoke up your ass, man. I'm not.
No, we're not just
That's how I feel.
I hope that I hope that you realize, David, that you have support here. Like, this space here is your space, and we will support you. We will help you. We will do whatever we can. Listen, we're not, I mean, we're just some people trying to, raise awareness and do what we can, but whatever we can do, I think I can speak for all of us that we'll do it. Like, we really do appreciate the sacrifice that you've made.
I can't tell you how much that is me. You're right.
Are you driving through a tunnel? Wow. Your audio's kind of taking a shit there, David. That was last bit was a little bit better. It's sounding like robots having sex is what it's sounding like. And now that image is in everyone's head.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks very much for that.
You're welcome.
What you're saying about the full messaging, angry about my case was the hypocrisy and the Mike Pompeo statements.
I got Mike Pompeo from that. I did. I heard Mike Pompeo's name.
Mike Pompeo robot porn.
Mike Pompeo robot porn. Wow. Now that is that's an animated series I would watch.
Absolutely.
Flat out. Fuck. Maybe David, if you can pop out and pop back in, we'll see if that changes anything. We've got about 30 minutes left in the show, and there are a couple of news items that I definitely want to get to. So
yes.
I think we should start with the Craig Murray article.
I agree. Absolutely. This is the one. Isn't this the one you posted earlier that I said, excuse me, while I water my cheeks?
Yeah. My advice was to not read it while you were cutting onions.
Yeah.
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 So, Sleepy Josh,
It's
if
up there.
we could get Damage to the Soul up on the screen. And again, so if you guys aren't aware, and we are going to play Taylor's clip here, Craig Murray, former ambassador, prolific journalist, very, very, very adamant supporter of Julian Assange,
And all around bona fide badass.
yeah, is himself in a fuck ton of hot water over writing stories that are true and printing them. Like Craig Murray is being legally threatened. His personal freedom is being threatened, all again for being a journalist. And in the midst of all of this, in the midst of his own just legal fuckery, he takes time out of his day and away from his own, focusing on his own defense, to write this piece that he titled Damage to the Soul. So we're going to cover that real quick because it is vital that the I guess axiom, first they came for Assange. It's vital that doesn't become the new normal, that we lose Craig Murray, that we lose the 468 journalists who were arrested, shot at, and otherwise tear gassed and otherwise fucked with during all of these protests. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to read some of this. Misty, if you want to take over at some point, that would be really cool.
Absolutely.
Too. You don't just have to hear my fucking voice.
Ready to go.
The imprisonment of Julian Assange has been a catalog of gross injustice heaped upon gross injustice, while a complicit media and indoctrinated population looks the other way. In a truly extraordinary twist, Assange is now being extradited on the basis of an indictment served in the UK, which is substantially different to the actual indictment he now faces in Virginia if extradited. The Assange hearing was adjourned after the first full week, and its resumption has since been delayed by the coronavirus. In that first full week, both the prosecution and the defense outlined their legal arguments over the indictment. As I reported in detail, and by the way, guys, if you haven't or if you didn't catch Craig Murray's coverage during the first week of Julian's rendition hearing, oh my God, was it fucking amazing. And it was a balm. Like, it was a hard week. And I mean, yeah, we were, going for like 20 straight hours in DC, but woo boy, it was phenomenal writing. As I reported in detail to an audience of millions, Assange's legal team fairly well demolished the key arguments of the prosecution during that hearing. This extract from my report on the defense case is of particular relevance to what has since happened. So we're going to go through this a little bit, and then I will probably pass it over to Misty. But for the defense, Mark Summers, QC, stated that the USA charges were entirely dependent on three factual accusations of Assange's behavior. One, Assange helped Manning to decode a hash key to access classified material. Summers stated this was provably false from the evidence of the Manning court-martial. 2, Assange solicited the material from Manning. Summers stated this was provably wrong from information available to the public. Number 3, Assange knowingly put lives at risk. Summers stated this was provably wrong, both from publicly available information and from specific involvement of the U.S. government. In summary, Summers stated, Jesus Christ, that is some alliteration. In summary, Summers stated the U.S. government knew that the allegations being made were false as to fact, and they were demonstrably made in bad faith. That'll be me muting David here. And we will get to the in bad faith. It's in bad. Where the fuck am I at? There we are. This was therefore an abusive process, which should lead to the dismissal of the extradition request. He described the three above counts as rubbish, rubbish, and rubbish. Summers then walked through the facts of the case. He said the charges from the U.S. divide the materials leaked by Manning to WikiLeaks into three categories: diplomatic cables, Gitmo detainee assessment briefs, Iraq war rules of engagement, and the Afghan and Iraq war logs. Summers then methodically went through all of these relating to each in turn to the alleged behaviors, making 12 counts of explanation and exposition in all. This comprehensive account took some 4 hours, and I shall not attempt to capture it here. I will rather give highlights, but will relate occasionally to the alleged behavior number and or the alleged materials letter. I'm not going to do that. That sounds a lot like fucking homework right now. But if you want to, you can go to craigmurray.org.uk and you can read this article. In fact, I recommend that you go to craigmurray.org.uk and read as much of it as you can possibly absorb, because again, Craig Murray's a fucking badass. On count one, Summers at great length demonstrated conclusively that Manning had access to each material, and that's, again, the war logs, collateral murder, rules of engagement, Gitmo files, and Cablegate, provided to WikiLeaks without needing any code from Assange, and had that access before ever contacting Assange. Nor had Manning needed a code to conceal her identity, as the prosecution alleged. The database for intelligence analysts Manning could access, as could thousands of others, did not require a username or password to access it from a work military computer. Can you wrap your fucking head around that for a second, y'all? Like, proof of war crimes. All of these diplomatic cables, the Guantanamo Bay files, all of them were sitting on military computers that, as long as you were an analyst at a workstation, you did not need a username or password to access any of this shit. Now, that's a little bit sloppy, a little
sloppy, or a little just arrogant,
right? Summers quoted testimony of several officers from Manning's court-martial to confirm this. Nor would breaking the system's admin code on the system give Manning access to any additional classified documents. Summers quoted evidence from the Manning court-martial where this had been accepted, that the reason Manning wanted to get into systems admin was to allow soldiers to put their video games and movies on their government laptops, which in fact happened frequently. Magistrate Brewster twice made major interruptions. She observed that if Chelsea Manning did not know she could not be traced as the user who downloaded the databases, she might have sought Assange's assistance to crack a code to conceal her identity. From ignorance, she did not need to do that. And to assist would still be offense by Assange. Summers pointed out that, and look, man, I wish I could have been in the courtroom myself for this when this whole 4-hour process was going on, because there were a couple of brilliant moments where, after interruptions by Vanessa Brewster, the attorney just fucking leveled her. Summers pointed out that Manning knew that she did not need a username and password because she actually accessed all the materials without one. Brewster replied that this didn't constitute proof that she knew she couldn't be traced. Summers said, in logic, it made no sense to argue that she was seeking a code to conceal her user ID and password when there was no user ID and password. Bratester replied again that he couldn't prove that. At this point, Summers became somewhat testy and short with Bratester and took her through the court-martial evidence again, of which Bratester also made the point that even if Assange were helping Manning to crack an admin code, even if it did not enable Manning to access more databases, that it was still unauthorized use and would constitute the crime of aiding and abetting computer misuse, even if for an innocent purpose. Now, can you wrap your head around what is supposed to be an impartial, fair and impartial interpreter of the law? That's all a magistrate does. Interprets the law fairly and impartially. Can you imagine? And you can, because it's happening, and it happened, and we've got reports of it. That fucking judge interrupting the lawyer to say, to quote the U.S. State Department's case against Julian Assange. She's not there to interpret the law in a fair and even-handed manner. She is there, as I've been calling her for months now. She is the concierge of the U.S. State Department. And this is what the fuck? I mean, it's right. It's right here in front of you. I'm going to pass this over now.
Okay. All right. Now, while there is no evidence that Judge Bratzer is giving any serious consideration to the defense case, what this has done is show the prosecutors the holes in their argument, which would cause them serious problems should they get Julian to trial in the United States. In particular, they are wary of the strong freedom of speech protections in the U.S. Constitution, and so are desperate to portray Julian as a hacker and not a journalist. And this is what Marjorie was touching on earlier. This superseding indictment is nothing more than to try to distinguish Julian Assange from a journalist and turn him into a hacker, because they have to make it okay to go against the First Amendment. That's basically the goal of this. But as you can see above, their case for this is not looking strong. So the prosecution needed a different case. They have therefore entirely changed the indictment against Julian in Virginia and brought in a superseding indictment. So this is a press release about the superseding indictment. It says, new allegations assert Assange conspired with anonymous affiliated hackers, among others. A federal grand jury returned a second superseding indictment today, charging Julian P. Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, with offenses that relate to Assange's alleged role in one of the largest compromises of classified information in the history of the United States. The new indictment does not add additional counts to the prior 18-count superseding indictment returned against Assange in May of 2019. It does, however, broaden the scope of the conspiracy surrounding alleged computer intrusions with which Assange was previously charged. According to the charging document, Assange and others at WikiLeaks recruited and agreed with hackers to commit computer intrusions to benefit WikiLeaks. Since the early days of WikiLeaks, Assange has spoken at hacking conferences to tout his own history as a famous teenage hacker in Australia, which, by the way, as a hacker, he helped take down a child pedophilia ring, but let's not talk about that, right? It's only mentioned, the bad stuff. And to encourage others to hack to obtain information for WikiLeaks. In 2009, for instance, Assange told the Hacking at Random conference that WikiLeaks had obtained non-public documents from the Congressional Research Service by exploiting a small vulnerability inside the document distribution system of the United States Congress, and then asserted that, quote, this is what any one of you would find if you were actually looking, end quote. In 2010, Assange gained unauthorized access to a government computer system of a NATO country. In 2012, Assange communicated directly with a leader of the hacking group. Excuse me. Where am I?
Lulzsec.
Oh, okay, there we go. Here I am. Who by then was cooperating with the FBI and provided a list of targets for Lulzsec to hack. With respect to one target, Assange asked the Lulzsec leader to look for and provide to WikiLeaks mail and documents, databases, and PDFs. In another communication, Assange told the Lulzsec leader that the most impactful release of hacked materials would be from the CIA, NSA, or the New York Times. WikiLeaks obtained and published emails from a data breach committed against an American intelligence consulting company by an anonymous and LulzSec-affiliated hacker. According to that hacker, Assange indirectly asked him to spam that victim company again. In addition, the broadened hacking conspiracy continues to allege that Assange conspired with Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning to crack password hash to a classified U.S. Department of Defense computer.
Can we break down that press release there? And I want to get David's opinion on this too. That's the press release about this superseding indictment, and look at just how look at how it's framed. Like, Julian Assange spoke at hacking conferences. Well, you know what, dude? So does fucking all kinds of programmers from all over the world. Like, if you're at I don't know, dude. It's so dumb. And all of this information, all of it is being provided by a convicted pedophile, a convicted con man, a convicted embezzler, someone who has been declared a sociopath by Iceland's health ministry, and also a paid FBI informant. That, and then their other star witness is also a paid FBI informant. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to take the word of a sociopath, pedophile, con man who was being paid by the FBI to infiltrate and set up WikiLeaks. David, I don't know how much of that you were able to catch, but I would like to hear your opinion on Mr. Murray's words and the press release there. Oh, I can't hear you. Hello?
It might have, if his Bluetooth headset's still on, it might have switched to it.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Should
I would check your.
Should I continue for now until we get him back?
Yeah, might as well do that. But
Okay.
yeah, I think you have to check your headset, David. Otherwise, we get yelled at when we have dead air.
Yeah, I can wait. I mean, I just didn't know if you wanted me to just go ahead.
No, jump in, man.
Okay. As you can see, this is about switching to charges firmly grounded in hacking, quote, hacking, rather than in publishing leaks about appalling American war crimes. The new indictment is based on the evidence of a supergrass. I always sound drunk when I say his name. Okay, I promise I'm not drunk. I'm not gonna try it. Fuck it. Who was acting as a paid informant to the FBI during his contact with WikiLeaks.
Your camera's off, Misty.
Mine is?
Yeah.
What the F, y'all? Here I am. Hi. Okay, where am I? He was convicted on the 22nd of December 2014 by, I don't know how to say that either, I'm not gonna try, District Court in Iceland, of stealing over $40,000 US and over 1,300 euro from WikiLeaks Sunshine Press accounts by forging documents in the name of Julian Assange and given a 2-year jail sentence. Thordarson is also a convicted sex offender and was convicted after being turned into the police by Julian Assange, who found the evidence, including of offenses involving a minor, on Thordarson's computer. There appears scope to doubt the motives and credentials of the FBI supergrass. The FBI have had Thordarson's evidence against Assange since long before the closing date for submissions in the extradition hearing, which was June 19th, 2019. That they now feel the need to deploy this rather desperate stuff is a good sign of how they feel the extradition hearing has gone so far, as an indicator of the prospects of a successful prosecution in the USA. And that's actually kind of, at first I was really confused by the superseding indictment. I didn't really know like what they were trying to pull. But then as, you know, I started looking at it and started listening to people who are way smarter than I am, it really does show that they are very aware of the weakness of their case. So if there is, like, you know, some positivity to this nonsense, it is that, I think.
Do we have you back, David?
Are you back?
Ah, damn it.
Dude.
Try to reconnect real quick, David.
Yeah, maybe hop out and hop back in. There we go.
Technology.
Right?
Kevin.
Ridiculous. Kevin!
I didn't even hear the warp warp. Oh, there you are.
What about now?
Hey!
It's really bad coverage where I am. I'm at a beach resort, so look, I agree with you, and I think the word that struck out at me was arrogance. And that they, as I said, it's not fair. It's totally run by the US. That hearing, they're putting in all sorts of bullshit now, and nobody's calling them on it. I did think Mark Summers did really well. He's got a little bit of what you need in a lawyer. He's not too stiff upper lip. But I love the way he said rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. You know, that's something that the average person can get their head around. And yeah, I think it's right. I think that it's not looking that good for them. But they don't seem to care that it's rubbish. But I thought that was a great article by Craig Murray, and I learned a fair bit from it too, because it shows you that the government are struggling now, and those witnesses. Yeah, if you compare those two witnesses to Julian, it's pretty shameful that they're preferred to speak for the US government as opposed to someone who's someone who clearly wants to make the world a better place.
I do. There's another article that we're probably not going to cover tonight, but it's related to what we're talking about here in this superseding indictment, where it accuses Julian of trying to solicit these lulsec hackers to target specific businesses or intelligence agencies, corporations, whatnot. What they're referring to is the WikiLeaks most wanted leaks list, which had already been publicly available way before this conference took place, way before LulzSec was even founded. And again, LulzSec was an FBI operation. The rat, Sabu, was already cooperating with the FBI before any of these hacks took place. So this was 100% entrapment on the part of the FBI. And in fact, when the Stratfor hack happened, within 48 hours, all of the material that Jeremy Hammond had liberated from Stratfor was on the FBI servers. The FBI hacked Stratfor. Jeremy Hammond was just the fucking person who facilitated it. But the FBI hacked Stratfor. Like, it's absolutely mind-boggling. I'm starting to get a little worked up.
Shall I continue?
Oh, please do. There's only a couple of paragraphs left.
Let's see. I don't know where I was at now. This leaves the UK? Yeah, okay. This leaves the UK extradition in a state of absolute farce. I was involved in discussion with WikiLeaks about what would happen when the superseding indictment was introduced at the procedural hearing last month. It ought not to have been accepted. It is over a year since the closing date, and a week of opening arguments on the old indictment have already been heard. The new indictment is plainly designed to redress flaws in the old one exposed at the hearing. The superseding indictment also is designed to counter defense witness affidavits, which have been disclosed to the prosecution, including expert witness testimony, which refutes the indictment on Assange's alleged hacking assistance to Manning. Until now, the sole ground of the hacking accusation. This switch, we averred, is an outrageous proposition. Was the whole hearing to start again on the basis of the new indictment? Then, to our amazement, the prosecution did not put forward the new indictment at the procedural hearing at all. To avoid these problems, it appears they are content to allow the extradition hearing to go ahead on the old indictment when that is not, in fact, the indictment which awaits Assange in the United States. This is utterly outrageous. Could not agree more. The prosecution will argue that the actual espionage charges themselves have not changed, but it is the indictment which forms the basis of the extradition hearing and the different indictment which would form the basis of any U.S. prosecution. To have extradition decided on the merits of one indictment when the accused actually faces another is an outrage. To change the indictment long after the hearing is underway and defense evidence has been seen is an outrage. The lack of media outrage is an outrage. Yes, brother. None of which will come as any shock to those of us who have been paying attention. We have to continue to build public consciousness of the fact that the annihilation of a journalist for exposing war crimes based on a catalog of state lies and dodgy procedure is not an act that the state can undertake without damage to the very soul of the nation. God damn it, I love Craig Murray.
So, David, when you read this, you have a very, very unique perspective that we don't, because you're reading it as a whistleblower, but you're also an attorney. You're also a lawyer. Like, from your perspective as a lawyer, what the fuck is the U.S. trying to do here? Like, where is the legal grounds for any of this?
Yeah, no, it's very sketchy. As you know, the law is very precise, and it's very pedantic. And the idea that you'd be able to change an indictment halfway through a case after you've seen the defense evidence, I mean, that in itself would normally have a case thrown out. Plenty of criminals, like bad criminals, have got out of jail for far smaller mistakes, procedural mistakes by the prosecution. It's not been conducted fairly, and the idea that the two best witnesses the US government can come out with are totally compromised. You know, it is a shambles, and it is. I love Craig Murray's phrase, because it is. It's something I've used myself. It damages more than just a single legal argument. It damages the soul of the Western nations. No one single conviction is worth throwing away 500 years or 1,000 years of developments in human rights and the rule of law.
God damn. Well, it is. I think that's a great place to wrap on that. David, will you please tell people where they can find you one more time and how to support you one more time? And thank you so much for coming back on the show and being a part of this with us. We really, really do enjoy these conversations with you. And goddamn, we just hope the best for you.
Thank you, and likewise. I'll say it again, but you really helped me. You are like, shot of vodka before the firing squad. I love it. And I've got a GoFundMe page. It's called 50 Years in Jail for Whistleblowing on the ADF. I'm also on Twitter, and I love to get support. It really helps, and especially from the US. It just shows, and I really think we can win this fight, and it'll be such a good party when we do.
Yeah, and just thank you so much for everything you've done. Hopefully, like you said, you've got hope for your case. We'll hold on to hope for your case too. We'll keep fighting for you and, shouting you out. I know that, we can post your GoFundMe. I can tweet it out. We'll do whatever we can. I just want to thank you. I want to thank Marjorie for coming on earlier. I was super excited to get to talk to you both. It was kind of this is a fire lineup tonight. You guys can find me on Twitter. at Sarcasm Stardust. I'm always there. And then I did just start hosting a show with my buddy Jesse Zerwell, Facts on the Ground. We've interviewed Dan Cohen about the Israel-Palestine conflict and the annexation. And then last week we talked to an Indigenous historian, Liza Black, about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls epidemic that's happening in North America. Probably some in Australia as well. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for having me on, and thanks to our two guests tonight. I appreciate it.
My name is Steve Poikin, and I host a show called Slow News Day, and you can find it on YouTube by typing Slow News Day Podcast into your search bar. I am also on the Rockfin and D Live, and hopefully more platforms soon. Please join me this Sunday. I've got like a double bill again. I will be interviewing the folks from Hardlands Media from 10 to 11, and then from 11 till we're done, Natalia Rivera, who runs the Mexico for Julian activist group, and I can't remember her fucking last name. Stephanie, she was on with us a couple of weeks ago. She's Commander X's lawyer. She's distractingly beautiful. It will be it'll be a good time. It will be. So make sure that you're tuned in for that. Huge thanks to Dave McBride and to Marjorie Cohn. It was lovely. And I would like to thank my co-hosts tonight here, Misty and Andrew, who bailed out a little bit early because he wasn't feeling well. So I hope he gets better. Thanks Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos, Mean Panda for the graphics. And to you guys who are watching right now, we love you and we need you.
Don't forget to hit up the GoFundMe for the actions in DC.
Yeah, please, if you can, donate to that GoFundMe. If you can't, we totally understand. But please share the link. We're getting closer. We're like, we can, because of you guys, we can actually book our accommodations now. And then we have, fairly lofty goals for the events and actions and demonstrations that we're planning to pull off there. So we definitely need help for that. And not just in terms of finances, man. We need asses in the street. If you are anywhere near the Washington, D.C. area for any of the first 3 weeks in September, get your asses down to D.C. and join us while we raise some fucking hell for Julian Assange. Because again, our task is to secure self-determination where we can, to hold back the coming dystopia where we cannot, and if all else fails, to accelerate its self-destruction. Good luck to us all.